Hi, I'm John McComb from The John McComb Show, and I took a left at the Valley.
I know we shouldn't have to scream that we're atheists. You know, we don't have non-astrologers and all that. But with the religious people taking over the world, I mean, we can either speak up or be pushed into a corner.
I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith and unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist. Atheist.
Coming at you from Trump's White House thingy, this is Left of the Valley. My name is Kevin. I don't lie, I use alternative facts. Joining me as usual is a team who supports the church in a non-traditional way. She didn't march with women, she just saunters for protesters. Nancy.
Sauntering along, I like it.
He didn't punch a theist, he simply gave him a backhanded compliment. Tyler.
Hey, how's it going?
And he didn't joke about Jesus, he simply tickled some ribs. Kevin.
Hey, everyone, it's great to be with you today.
Guys, welcome back. I hope you guys had a good week. Welcome back to the show.
Alternative facts, eh?
Of course.
Are people starting to realize why I'm so pissed about alternative medicine now? Like, we call it that for a reason.
Yeah.
Bell right out of the gate. Good for you, man. Well, first, we're going to have a great show today. We're talking to the legendary Seth Andrews. That will be fun.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, everybody knows who he is. I watched his interview with Richard Dawkins this morning, and that's pretty much all the information that I have. So I have obviously some beginner questions, I guess.
Good to know.
Oh, geez.
He gets a lot of views, though, eh?
Yeah, he's a popular guy.
He's super popular. But first, a bit of chit-chat. So, Mr. Trump is quick out of the gate, and he's... Nancy, I know you want to talk about this because last week you weren't here with us, but you went to Bellingham to do the Women's March, which is probably one of the biggest marches in the world, actually.
Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
it was fabulous. The regardless of what you think about the inauguration and you think about Trump, although the two are tied in, that march, it was an activist delight. It really was. It brought together people for all the right reasons. And in Bellingham, let me backtrack. I went to the Women's March in Bellingham, Washington, which is just about 40 minutes over the border from where we have our studio here in Abbotsford. And so it was a very quick commute. Went with a friend. And the population in Bellingham is a little over 80,000 people. It may be approaching 100,000, but it has a way to go. And they were anticipating 5,000 people to march. And they had a wonderful Facebook page. It was well organized. They gave a lot of information out for people coming to the march, what they should wear, what they should bring, how aware they should be about their surroundings. They put who would be there protecting them if need be. They put everything on there.
So they set up security and stuff?
Yeah, they had
good.
the police. They were there, and then they also had some marched not protectors, but leaders, to be able to guide people and answer questions.
Kind of like Goodwill ambassadors.
Goodwill ambassadors.
Okay,
They had food trucks along the line. They made sure that everybody there would be comfortable. So out of 80,000 population and expecting 5,000, 10,000 people showed up, and the beginning of the march was at City Hall. And if you visualize 10,000 people, you'd think of people jammed together, pushing and shoving, everybody trying to, and it was exactly the opposite. The mood was jovial and friendly. It was truly like an outing, a family outing. There were children, there were adults, there were people in wheelchairs, there were seniors, there were people of all different stripes and colors, and I'd say half of them at least were carrying signs, and there were a lot of people. It was so much fun because there were people taking photos of all of the different signs, but it was a really happy occasion. They had people there who provided some entertainment and had some speeches, and so we got there about 10 o'clock, and then the march started about 11, and the march itself was a mile long from City Hall down into the downtown section of Bellingham. And the interesting thing to me was, after the march, when I looked at the videos and the Facebook pages of the other marchers, they were interchangeable. The marchers in LA versus New York versus Denver versus Bellingham, if you put all those pictures side by side, you couldn't tell. They were smiling, they were children, there were people who had a really joyous outlook. And the march was not only against Trump, but it was for the spirit of positivity and what we could accomplish if we all stood together, and making sure we have each other's backs.
What was the news coverage like?
Well, this reporter was possibly a little hasty earlier. Would like to reaffirm his allegiance to this country and its human president. May not be perfect, but it's still the best government we have. For now.
The news cover, I couldn't...
Like TV stations and newspapers?
Well, there were some helicopters overhead, but there were so many people taking pictures that it was hard to tell if they were news people or not. I think the paper did cover it quite well, the Bellingham Herald, but I don't know whether there were any other TV stations there.
I don't remember what the number was nationwide, 3 million or something.
Oh,
like
half
that.
a million easy.
No, I
nationwide it was.
Yeah, well, not half a million. It was wasn't it over a million, Kevin? How
I thought it was 3 million.
Yeah, I thought it was a big number.
I guess.
So you guys just walk from point A to point B, just in unison or whatever.
Yeah, everybody. Well, you could
Nancy
leave
was
anytime.
burning her bra.
Yeah, I bet.
I guess the most important takeaway is that, was this a moment or a movement? And of course, everybody is, who wants democracy to continue is hoping that the people who put their time and their energy into the march are also going to do it by either joining or supporting the ACLU and Planned Parenthood and other organizations that are there to help protect democracy.
I read this really good article from The Atlantic. It was something along the lines of how to learn from the older protests, like the Martin Luther King ones and all that kind of stuff. I mean, walking from point A to point B was good, but the way that Martin Luther King and people like that tend to make a big impact is they were doing a lot of boycotting and getting large groups of people, like you're saying, to block off entrances and exits of like important government buildings, that kind of thing, being an actual nuisance, right?
Well, I think the purpose of this was not to be a nuisance, but to show solidarity and to let the incoming...
As like an initial, we're going to stand together kind of thing. Because the abortion crap that's happening in the States is pissing me off. And Canada and the Netherlands have kind of agreed to pitch in cash to be able to provide that kind of thing. I mean, somebody the other day from Canada was saying that we don't, here in Canada, provide abortions to people free of charge. And the truth is the opposite. I'd say more than 90% of abortions are publicly funded, and they even force private companies who are doing the abortions to basically get some government involvement and government money.
Yeah, when you have an abortion, it's not costing you anything but an arm and a leg.
But it's like it's like a minimum of $400 in some places in the States, and when you're on welfare and you've already got kids, you're trying to help those. You're trying to make it easy. You need to throw free birth control at them.
I agree. I totally agree.
To close off the march for a little bit and bring Canada into it, one negative thing that happened, and it was happening here in BC and some instances in Eastern Canada as well, is that there were Canadians who went to the U.S. or tried to go to the U.S. to march. And at some places, at some border crossings, when they told the border guards that they were going to the U.S. to march, they were turned away and said that they can't enter. They were questioned about their politics and what they thought about Trump. And before my girlfriend and I left she sent me a text saying that someone she knew had been turned away. And so when we went to the border, I'm a U.S. citizen,
Yeah,
so they
exactly.
had to let me in. But I wasn't about to go without my girlfriend. So we decided we would tell the border guards we were going shopping, which was
Good
partially
idea.
the truth. It was an alternate fact. It was accepted. So,
That's good.
but that was the only negative in that the border guards,
Yeah.
some of them, got some
Well, I mean,
order.
if you're Canadian and you're protesting American politics, I don't you don't belong there. You really don't. I mean, it is a problem for Americans to solve. It is their president, like or not. If you don't like Trump and whatever he does worldwide on the worldwide stage, protest in the country you're at.
Well,
Right? There was a protest in Vancouver as well.
I mean, play devil's advocate,
The power of Christ compels you!
there could have been a question of security and whether or not Canadians might have been injured. If there had been, some protesters who decided to get into some form of conflict with the marchers and so forth. But most of the Canadians really felt that the Americans were being unfairly targeting them, and not allowing them in, and not only targeting them,
Stay on target.
but detaining them and asking them questions for hours that seemed to be more intrusive. In fact, one fellow who was detained was told he couldn't go back for the weekend, and if he wanted to go back into the States, he was going to have to get a visa to do so. So there were some heavy-handed
You're going to have to do more than that. That kind of thing is easy to ignore. Once you start blocking off routes, even trains, anything that costs the government money and a pain in the ass and an outcry, you might have to just put 2,000 people on a railroad track or something like that. And they will stop, obviously, but just marching from point A to point B is very, very, very easy to ignore.
Well, but this wasn't a.
No, I know. It's more like a warning. No, I
Yeah, it's the
understand.
first step.
No,
It's the first step.
It's just a warning, yeah.
We are a force. We are watching. We will take action. And there are enough of us to make a difference. So it was that. I think the protests are probably coming up. The protests are on the way, but this wasn't one of them.
What you might not know is while you were doing this and we were doing the show, we tried to call you. Mm-hmm. And
Yes, I know.
Yeah, you probably got the voicemail.
Yeah.
I left you a message.
And unfortunately, but we didn't get to you, but we did manage to tap your phone.
Oh, okay.
To hack into your phone, and we actually heard your strategy. So this is Nancy's strategy while she was marching.
Crush your enemies.
He's
See them driven before
obsessed
you.
with that clip.
And hear the lamentation of the women.
That totally sounds like Nancy's voice.
It
I
does.
know. Do you like my ability to do impressions?
That's
really
almost
good.
like Arnold
It's really
Schwarzenegger. Like, seriously.
The whole getting a permit for a protest thing just sounds contradictory in its nature, doesn't it?
It
It's
does.
like,
And
let's organize an anarchist group.
And I don't think peaceful protest is necessarily the most effective way of doing things. We had some racist professors at a university. I think it was in the 60s. It was in Montreal, though. And just basically trying to fail black people who were getting good marks. And they took over the university and destroyed the computer lab and all this stuff. And then the police ended up setting the place on fire themselves to kind of smoke them out, which you'd never be allowed to do today, and put a whole bunch of them in jail. But after that, they were very, very strict about keeping it in mind. You know what I mean? Like, they took complaints seriously, because when they didn't take them, the white people got together with them too and helped them. It was probably predominantly black, but they cost them a whole bunch of money by breaking in and taking over and destroying the computer lab. And that stuff happened during Martin Luther King too, right? People always think Martin Luther King was anti-violence, but he had a lot of followers that weren't. Yeah. There was also the Black Panthers. There was also Malcolm X.
There's a Malcolm X.
Malcolm X was very aggressive compared to Martin Luther King.
Back in the 60s, when I was a member of Martin Luther King's group, the SC, as you realize, Southern Christian Leadership Conference,
SCLC,
those of us who were active in the Fort Worth area were dedicated to peaceful marching.
What year were you born in, Nancy?
1936. Yeah, a long time ago,
so
right?
You were like 32 when Martin Luther King got assassinated?
Right, and I had a chance to go to Selma, but I had small children and didn't go, so we chose to have a peaceful protest in Fort Worth. Just very quickly, the interesting thing about our marching in Fort Worth was that the newspaper and all of the outlets in Fort Worth decided that they would not cover any protest marches or anything that had to do with civil rights. So although we were there, and we marched and we did everything we needed to do, a great majority of the population of Fort Worth and Dallas never realized that there were protests because the not having any media effectively blacked out our ability to make a difference.
The media is always the biggest player in this.
Yeah.
Well, getting back on track there, it's time for This Day in History.
Oh, wow. Putting a strain on my... Maybe I have to take that accent back. Okay, here we go. A roundup of those events and individuals that altered and illuminated the days between January 23rd to January 29th. January 23rd was National Pie Day in the States. They have National Everything Day. We ought to have a national something, for our show.
They have a new
days.
Patriots Day established by Trump. I mean, aside from July 4th.
And it ruins inaugurations forever.
Stupid. Yeah.
Yeah.
National God is Dead Day. How about that?
Yeah. On January the 23rd, in 1970, going back again for a while, Madalyn Murray O'Hair, our favorite activist, announced that she was going to start a new church. And she called the church Poor Richard's Universal Life Church, and she named it after her husband. And she proclaimed herself as the church's bishop and her husband the official prophet. And she had actual charter from the Universal Life Church of California, where she and her husband have an honorary Doctor of Divinity degrees. There were all these churches online. Well, there wasn't an online at that point, but they were by mail. They advertised, and you could get a divinity degree, you could get a sheriff's degree, you could get a law, you could get almost anything you wanted to.
I believe our guest Seth Andrews is actually a reverend for the Church of Dudism. It's actually a thing.
Yeah. So but when she and her husband got these pseudo degrees, she said, no, this is not a pseudo-religion. This is going to be an earnest attempt to do something about the relationship of the church in this country. She said we can marry and divorce people, and we can administer sacraments and so forth. So she was 100% serious when she talked to people about the church. And she said, here's the real reason she started the church. She said she intended to take full advantage of every tax exemption normally given without a second thought to churches and other religious groups.
That's right.
She said, we're going to operate just as all the other churches do. Now the churches have told us 1,000,000 times over, and so has the federal government, that atheism is a religion, so we're going to accept it. So she and her husband took oaths of poverty and turned all their property over to the church. At least she said they did. And the church, she did give some sermons and things like that in fun on the radio when they did it. But then she closed it 8 years later in 1978 when her husband died. January 20th, but it was a fun thing for her to do tongue-in-cheek. Yeah. January 26th is International Customs Day, and that day in 1875, George F. Green of Kalamazoo, Michigan, patented the electric dental drill for sawing, filing, dressing, and polishing teeth, and it was described as an electromagnetic dental tool. So the reason I put that in was because I knew I could cause a collective shiver.
Yes, that's exactly what happened.
I felt it. It made the ground shake under everybody's feet. Sorry about that, but that was fun.
Need to put a drill drop behind that.
January the 27th. Now I'm going to get into it a little bit, so everybody hold on to your belts. January the 27th, which was Friday, was International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and it has always been a very solemn day, and it has been a remembrance of what happened to the Jews during World War II and the attempt to exterminate them and the Nazis and so forth and so on.
I was told that never happened. What are you talking about?
Yeah. In
Comments
May,
of color, not necessarily those. Left of the valley, subsidiaries.
Yeah, in May of 1939, a ship called the SS St. Louis sailed from Hamburg to Havana. There were 900 passengers on that ship, a little over 900 passengers. They went to Havana, they were turned away. They came to Miami, they were turned away, and they were actually turned back. And some of the passengers were accepted in Belgium and England, but many of them perished in concentration camps. Over 200, about 250 were actually killed in the concentration camps. Because of that, because of the shame that the U.S. felt having turned that ship away, and prior to this, the Congress had turned down a bill to allow children from Germany, Jewish children, to come to the United States for safety reasons, and Congress turned them down.
Yeesh.
Children under 14, they turned those down.
Seriously?
After World War II ended, the U.S. revised immigration policies to prevent inhuman rejection until yesterday. And that's when Trump, the morning of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, issued a statement of, first of all, he issued a statement of remembrance without mentioning the Jews whatsoever. They're not even mentioned. And then he closed the door on refugees for 120 days and those from Syria indefinitely. But minority Christians are exempt and will be allowed
Of course.
to come in.
Did you hear about the guy who
For
wore
Trump to have done this on International Holocaust Remembrance Day is so callous, so immoral, and so lacking in compassion that I don't know whether there's anything that man can ever do.
What did you say, Swansky?
Oh, it's just there was a guy who wore like a Nazi swastika to one of those to the remembrance ceremonies, and he got beaten up. Not surprising. There was a huge debate about it online. It's like, yeah, he should have gotten beat up.
Well, yeah, it's like wearing a shirt that says some sexist comment about women or some bad comment about
And going to
disabled
Anyway,
children.
not to end on a totally bad note. On January the 28th, it marks the 100th anniversary of the women's right to vote in Canada. And generally, when we've done this little segment before, we've always pointed out the various countries that still don't have the women's vote.
Did you say 1917? 100 years?
January 20th, 100 years.
1917?
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Women's right to vote in Canada.
In Canada, really?
Right.
Oh, wow.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it was passed federally, but the provinces adopted that much later. Some of the provinces, like Quebec, was the last one to adopt it, and I believe it was 1948.
Whoa, that's really late. Wow,
Yeah.
that's still pretty, I guess.
So one of the countries that we've always pointed out was Saudi Arabia, when the women got the right to vote in 2015. So I wondered what happened to those women.
I don't think they've been through an election yet.
They have. They've been through.
Oh, have
they've been through an election. They can run for office, but they can't campaign, and they have to keep all the other restrictions that were there. But an interesting thing has happened in that a documentary called "Ladies First" was made last year by Times video journalist named Mona El Nagar, and she takes viewers inside Saudi Arabia to witness the ultra-conservative elections that have taken place. So anybody that wants to go on YouTube can download Ladies First, which is a documentary for that.
I saw a more recent one, I think.
Countries holding out are still Brunei, Lebanon, United Arab Emirates, and unless Pope Francis, the real Pope Francis,
Pope Francis,
has made a special announcement, the Vatican still doesn't do it. And that, dear listeners, brings to a close another passing parade of interesting, mundane, unusual, and occasional bizarre, and sometimes a rant, and people that make up this day in history.
Thank you,
Nancy. Tyler, you were saying something there before we just finished that segment?
I was probably saying a lot of things, but regarding the Holocaust thing, I encourage people to YouTube Michael Shermer and Alan. I can't remember the guy's last name. It doesn't matter. It'll still come up. And it's called Denying History, and it's an interview with Shermer, who did the book. They did a whole bunch of research on the Holocaust and just absolutely slaughtered every single Holocaust denial possible claim. It's fantastic. Michael Shermer did an amazing job.
Okay.
Completely debunking every angle of the Holocaust and all. So.
Well, before we go to our to pause and to our guests, let's do
things that make you go.
We got a nice little story for you guys. Should be fun.
You steal more stuff from the gym?
No, that's not it. That's the confession segment.
Oh, confessions, yeah.
That's not the same thing. You guys ever heard of Goop?
Yeah.
Goop is, it's gone a little too far. Goop is Gwyneth Paltrow's lifestyle blog.
Okay, no, maybe not.
Gwyneth Paltrow, she's pretty eccentric. And her blog recommends that women put jade eggs up their vaginas to strengthen the pelvic floor muscles and improve their sex life.
Well, it's Kegels, yeah.
Yeah, Kegels, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The jade eggs, aka yoni eggs, are basically jade stones, if you wish, garnered even more attention when Portia Williams and Shayma Morton tried them out in a recent episode of Real Housewives of Atlanta. But doctors are saying, no, you shouldn't put a rock up your lady parts. So the bizarre trend started when Goop posted the article earlier this month called Better Sex, Jade Eggs for Your Yoni. In which actresses and beauty blogger Shiva Rose answered question about the practice. She claims that the yoni eggs, yoni means womb or sacred place, are strictly guarded secrets of Chinese royalty, and that fans say regular use will increase your chi, your orgasms, your vaginal muscle tone,
your chakras,
your chakras, hormonal balance, feminine energy.
Gotcha, yeah.
So the article says that women of any age, once sexually active, can benefit from the egg, and that the key is regular daily practice. And even points out some women prefer to sleep with the egg in.
Okay. You just find the weirdest shit, don't you?
Oh, I do.
Okay, didn't Gwyneth Paltrow name her kid Apple?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she did, so I'm just going to add Hom and her right now and say don't listen to anybody who names your kid Apple.
So apparently they're for sale for about $55 to $66. Well, talk about hard-boiled trans, huh?
Vagina rocks.
I've heard of Ben Wa balls and stuff, and I wouldn't see the detriment if it's properly constructed and made of surgical grade steel or something like that.
Well, first of all, it's jade. Jade is,
it's like a glass.
Yeah, but then what happens when it's not tonight, honey? I prefer the egg.
I think there's several weird things about Gwyneth Paltrow, if I remember. I don't remember if she's an anti-vaxxer or just one of those big organic pushers, but she's pretty well known.
Yeah, she's been known to
some quackery beliefs,
steam her vagina and stuff like that. She's got a whole bunch of quackeries like that.
I would never sleep with anybody who has eggs.
Well, first of all, you can't no, because they're rocks, right? And you can't sleep with somebody with rocks unless you have paper or scissors.
There you go. I think she was Brad Pitt's wife in the movie Seven. Am I correct?
Yes.
She was. Yes, she was. So, all right. So, thank you so much, guys. So, we'll take a break. We'll be right back with Seth Andrews.
What is secular humanism?
Critical thinking. Knowledge is freedom. Freedom from ignorance and its offspring, fear.
The BC Humanist Association has been active in the Vancouver area for over 25 years. We offer a friendly and welcoming place to make new friends, as well as free educational lectures. We invite you to join us any Sunday at 10 a.m. in the Oak Ridge Senior Center. Please visit our website for more details, bchumanist.ca.
Hi, I'm the Supreme Irreverend Dr. Randy Tyson from the Legion of Reason Diversion. Join me and my co-hosts, Christine Shelska, Twyla, and Nate Phelps, as we explore issues at the intersection of atheism, humanism, and skepticism. Topics range from alternative medicine to the interference of religion in public policy. We often have special guests to help us understand the topic du jour. Previous guests include biologist Jerry Coyne, ex-Muslim author Ali Rizvi, philosopher Peter Boghossian, and the late physicist Victor Stanger. You can watch us on the Legion of Reason YouTube channel or subscribe to the audio version through your favorite podcatcher such as iTunes or Stitcher. And don't forget to like the Legion of Reason Facebook page.
Here's an excerpt from Our Constitution, The Way It Was, by Dr. Madeleine O'Hare.
Seemingly, no one knew just what to do. There was no clear-cut program. Some wanted to try to continue to negotiate with the British government. Others wanted to continue the armed revolt in the hopes of forcing the king and parliament to remedy their grievances. There was no one, apparently, who had the vision to call for complete severance of all political ties with Britain and to found a new nation. The situation remained stalemated until the end of the year. Then, in January 1775, Thomas Paine's pamphlet, Common Sense, came off the press. It was like a fresh wind clearing away a fog. In the simple yet forceful language that characterizes all his writings, Paine showed the absurdity of continuing a relationship of colonies to a mother country. Why, he asked, should the colonies, already peopled with 3 million inhabitants and destined to expand to cover a vast continent, be ruled from a small island 3,000 miles away? Why continue to be subjects of a tyrant king when the way was open to be citizens of a free republic? This pamphlet spread like wildfire. The small presses of the time could not keep up with the demand. Hundreds of thousands of copies were issued and penetrated to every colony in a short time. Paine's arguments were unanswerable. They left no middle ground. All talk of compromise and further petitions to Parliament died out.
Find this audiobook and many more at atheistaudiobooks.com.
I don't know where the lights are taking us, but something in the night is dangerous, and nothing's holding back the two of us. Baby, this is getting serious. The danger, dangerous. Show me your soul, I gotta know. Best that you're beautiful inside.
Okay, our next guest was a Christian broadcaster who became host of the biggest atheist podcast out there. His velvety voice and quick wit is sure to turn you into a fan. He's a snappy dresser and a snazzy dancer. Seth Andrews, ladies and gentlemen. Seth, welcome. Welcome to the
I can't live up to that introduction. That's just too good. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you. Thanks for coming.
Yes,
Snappy dresser is going on a business card. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, putting that on a business card.
Seth, of course, most of our audience are non-believers and atheists, and they know you simply by reputation. But we actually do have a segment of our audience that does not, are not believers, or not free thinkers, or not atheists. They might not know you. Would you be so kind to give us the Seth Andrews stories?
Yeah, just in a nutshell, I was born. I'm an Oklahoma resident, which, if you live outside of the United States, you may be thinking, what, where, and the truth is, just think church.
The power of Christ compels you.
I live in the Bible Belt. We have hundreds upon hundreds of Christian churches in this city. We have 2 major religious universities in this city. I think the third, Tulsa University is also privately owned by religious people. It's Jesus Town is what I call it. That's where I was born to devoutly religious parents. My folks were not Sunday Christians. They were hardcore. They met at Oral Roberts University. They honeymooned in Jerusalem because they wanted to go. I guess they wanted to spend their honeymoon with Jesus. It's just like, that's just how hardcore they let's go to Galilee. Let's go to the Holy Lands. That's their idea of a honeymoon. My mother, a Greek New Testament study guide author and a Greek New Testament teacher for decades.
Wow.
And I just was raised in the cocoon of Christianity. We had Christian schools. I was in Christian schools from 4th grade through my graduation. Was surrounded, listened to Christian music. I had Christian friends. We memorized Christian verses. We did Christian stuff.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
I became a Christian radio host I think I started in 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in Christian radio for about a dozen years. A decade of that was with KXOJ Radio in Tulsa, one of the most popular and successful Christian radio stations in the United States. And I was all in. I was a true believer. And it's funny, I sort of came late to my doubts. I finally started to be honest with myself when I began to, hear that alarm bell of doubt in the back of my skull. And it was around the age of 37, I finally decided to start asking hard questions and not take just go with it, just have faith, just trust Jesus as a suitable answer. It was a video by Christopher Hitchens that really sort of spurred me along. I just stumbled upon it on YouTube, and before I knew it, I was on this journey. And by the time I hit December of 2008, I realized and said out loud I was an atheist. And I was alone. I just didn't know anybody. I didn't have any atheist friends. All my family and friends thought I was out of my mind, or I was going through midlife or whatnot. And so to sort of vent a little bit about the decades I'd wasted and to find community, I created one. And it's called The Thinking Atheist. The Thinking Atheist isn't a person. It's an idea that we reject faith and we embrace reason. We want to think about the challenges and opportunities before us. The website started in 2009. I did a radio show. I started radio podcasting in 2010. And I don't know how we rank, in terms of podcast overall, but I've been very fortunate and very happy with the success we've had. We've got more than 42 million total downloads.
Yeah, you're just a little bit below
more than 300 shows. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. I came late to skepticism. I came late to non-belief. But I'm here, for what it's worth. And I think we're all doing what we can to try to encourage other people and further the conversation out there.
Mm-hmm. And just like Tyler was saying, what was that, Tyler, you were saying?
Oh, just that...
His 42 million downloads?
Yeah, you rank pretty high up there. I think you're just a couple behind us.
No,
I'm sure you guys are right on my heels.
Yes. Thank you, Seth, for joining us, and he's going to be staying with us. But right now, we're going to be doing another brilliant moment brought to you by religion. Guys, did you hear that story about this Ohio man and his son that are using the Bible to defend themselves in court against multiple charges of rape, kidnapping, and endangering children?
Deuteronomy, I think.
This is via the Washington Post. 53-year-old Timothy Ciboro and his 28-year-old son, Eston, have been allowed to use the Bible as their main piece of evidence to defend themselves against accusations that they kidnapped and raped several underage girls at their home in Toledo, Ohio, over the span of several years. Quote, "There's a great deal of strategy in Scripture, and I use those strategies in everything I do," Eston Ciboro told the court last week when explaining why he and his father should be allowed to use the Bible in court as part of the defense. Geez, guys, who wants to take a bet with me right now? This is not going to fly.
How are they doing so far?
Actually, today, I saw on Pathos today, just before we did the recording, that they've been found guilty, and I believe the father's going to be in prison for 71 years or something like that.
Do you think that's enough for them to give up religion? You think that's their aha moment?
I don't know.
Moment?
Seth, you're an American. You tell me. You think the Bible is a viable option in the defense of American justice?
I would be terrified. I'm terrified every time anyone swears on an oath on the Bible, because I think to myself, if you only realized, maybe you do, you realize what you're swearing upon. I don't know. I myself, it's funny how people approach the Bible. I'm airing an interview in a few weeks with Bart Campolo, who's the son of famous evangelist Tony Campolo, who is, Bart is now a non-believer and is secular chaplain in California. Woo-hoo! And he's got a great perspective on the Bible. He's like, I can make the Bible do anything I want. Like, you want to be anti-woman, you want to shut a woman up, we can use the Bible for that. You want to be pro-woman and lift a woman up, put her on a pedestal, we can use the Bible for that. And you want me to be anti-slavery, I can use the Bible. If you want me to be pro-slavery, I can use the Bible. It's like silly putty. You can just sort of mold it into whatever it needs to be.
It's a great
to
book
make
to
whatever point
cherry
you want to
pick,
make,
It's a great analogy.
Because it's not one book, it's a shitload of books.
Holy shitballs.
If you count the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Well, of course, we all we know the Bible obviously is there's a divine hand on it. Did you guys read that article, that story? I guess it was a few days ago in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. There was an EF3 tornado that plowed into William Carey University, just ripped the place to shreds, including the chapel on campus. And so the whole place is shredded. And, oh, look, right here on a pedestal, open to the book of Psalms, they find a Bible untouched. And the local news just ran with this story. They're calling it a sign. They're calling it a miracle. WDAM television did this story about how it's just so wonderful. There's this photograph of the Bible amidst the chapel that God did nothing to protect. I think to myself, God's got a priority problem. Look, I can replace the Bible for about $10. I can replace it monogrammed for $12. Why don't you torch the Bible and save the chapel? Because that's going to be a whole lot more money out of my pocket.
Well, don't you know the saying, lightning rods on churches?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, why are they there?
It reveals an alarming lack of faith. It's absolutely true.
I think during the Renaissance and whatnot, I think somewhere in Europe in like the 1600s or the 1700s, doesn't matter. It was Sunday, church, packed, earthquake, killed a shitload of people. And the survivors were like, maybe. Maybe it is kind of just, shit happens.
When people tell me about God's master plan and his intelligent design, I'm always like, yeah, thanks God for the sinkholes and the tsunamis and the sun gives us cancer and all the stuff. I mean, this whole planet's just a meat grinder for them.
Well, without that stuff, would we really
I totally
appreciate
understand your point.
Would we appreciate when it's going good if we didn't have the bad?
Yeah, that's exactly.
Devil's advocate. No, I like whenever they talk about God and money, I like to quote one of my favorite philosophers of all time, Homer Simpson. And he says, if God needs money, why did he just write another Bible? The first one sold pretty well.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
Seth, tell me something. Your show, when your show originated, were you in an angry phase? Because you had sort of recently deconverted, no?
Yeah, I
there's that
you
angry
can
phase.
see a temperature change in a lot of my work. I did a lot more video production back then because I had more time, and the radio show I think I did bi-weekly, and I was also was barely sleeping. I was so, I don't know how to describe this, but I was so adrenalized coming out of my faith and thinking, if people only knew what I've discovered recently with a more objective analysis of the scriptures, they would be fascinated by it, and certainly they would run screaming from all of the horrible ideas that they never realized before was in the Bible. I'm going to produce as much as I can, and I'm going to lampoon Christianity like it deserves to be. I'm going to go show the world, and they'll all rally together, and we'll all have... I mean, I was that naive, right? And, of course, nobody cared. When I went to them with my challenges and questions, they just doubled down, and they kind of gave you that mannequin stare, and then I was angry. I was angry because I felt like, you guys are the one who are supposed to meet the burden of proof. I've got religious family, religious parents I'm even now estranged from. Religion's cost me a relationship with my mother and father. We have a tenuous sort of it's if you can call it a relationship. We see each other at Thanksgiving and Christmas, and we smile, and under the surface is a tremendous sort of a undercurrent of shame and embarrassment and condescension, that kind of stuff.
That's because they think atheism.
I felt like I'd wasted a lot of time. I felt like nobody was listening. And so my stuff did have a harder edge back then. I was, I produced The Story of Susie, which was pretty hard on Christians. I produced Noah's Ark, God, Giraffes, and Genocide, which I still enjoy today. But all my stuff was a bit more biting and sarcastic. And what happened is after a few years, I finally began to calm down. And now I'm a little more generous about those who hold to faith. Most people who hold to faith, I just see them as victims. I call them victims of bad ideas. Mm-hmm. I'm not you have to be stupid to believe this, because honestly, I believed it on the order of decades. And I, of all people, should know how indoctrination works and how cultural reinforcement works and how belief perseverance works. And, I myself then realized that telling someone they're an idiot for believing this stuff is not the best way to change their minds, but approaching them whenever possible with compassion and empathy and understanding and a genuine desire to help really seems to go a lot further. Mm-hmm. So, I was angry for a while, and I have my moments even today, but overall I've calmed myself a little bit.
Well, people who have never lived in the South, I lived in Dallas for a long time, and it's very, very similar between Dallas and Oklahoma City. There are a lot of parallels. And when you grow up in that kind of atmosphere, you really don't know that another world of science and reason exists. You go to school as a child and you hear about science and you learn about those things, but it's not your core existence. Every adult that you come in contact with is one who's reinforcing that religious view and that religious outlook. And if there's anyone who disagrees with that, you hear your parents tearing them down. And those are your adults, those are your authorities, not the teachers. So for you to have been in that that atmosphere and to have had that reinforcement for so long, of course you were angry, and of course you wanted to tell everybody coming out of it. That's the kind of journey that you're on. But it's very difficult to explain that to people who have lived in Chicago or New York, where there was the diversity, and they could probably find anybody on the same block where they lived to be able to talk with them about non-religious matters and about things that we didn't learn or you didn't learn until you were in your 30s. It's quite a ways for to go from a little neighborhood in Oklahoma and suddenly be exposed. I guess the internet and the radio and the media are religion's greatest opposition, because that's where you finally get a channel to the truth.
Yeah, but have you guys seen the brain scan differences on people that are religious? I mean, it registers in the limbic system, so you can be really smart and really cerebral, as we call it, like people like Francis Collins and Kenneth Miller, very, very smart people when they're using their neocortex. But as soon as the limbic system kicks in, the emotional part of the brain where you're thinking about death and your kids dying and never being able to see them again, therefore heaven is kind of awesome because you get to spend eternity with your kids, right? That part just takes over. So you do have smart people that believe stupid shit. And then obviously, Seth came around, which is funny. Maybe it's biological, but they pretty much did everything possible to convert him into Joel Osteen. He didn't turn out that way.
No, but it's a good question to ask Seth. Seth, do you believe that a lot of people are claiming right now you cannot reason somebody that hasn't been reasoned into faith? You can't reason them out. Where do you stand on that issue? Do you feel that that's a true statement?
I was reasoned out of my faith.
There we go.
Well, I was talking to Matt Dillahunty about this. He was reasoned out of his faith. He was presented with reasonable things, and it took a while. But I don't like the idea that you'll never reason someone out of something they weren't reasoned into to begin with, because I think, I was reasoned out of my faith. That's one of the reasons I'm a non-believer. Michael Shermer and I did, for those who don't know, he's a psychologist and founder of Skeptic magazine, and he's done a lot of high-profile discussions and debates with people like Deepak Chopra and whatnot.
Yeah.
And he's done a lot of work on belief in the brain. And we did a show together, and I think his book is similarly titled Why Smart People Believe Stupid Things.
Weird thing.
And he had an interesting take that it's often the really intelligent that are the best at outsmarting themselves. Like, you can invent a tremendous mechanism for rationalization if you're clever enough. You can find a way in and through the nonsensical and the immoral if you're clever enough. And while Dr. Ryan Cragen down at the University of Tampa has some research which seems to indicate that largely overall there is a higher intelligence factor among the non-religious, there are a lot of really smart people out there who have compartmentalized, or they've just used their wits to rationalize what is probably an inherited faith. And it's interesting to watch them work, And then you look at it, you just want to grab them by the shoulders and shake them and say, you're a smart person, how can you still believe this? And the fact is, in many cases, they just outsmarted themselves. They have what Dale McGowan calls is a greater desire to believe than they have to know.
Yes.
And in my own life, I had to come to a point when my desire to know simply became greater than my desire to believe, and it opened up my whole world.
That 1984 double speak.
That depends on
double think.
That depends on your definition of intelligent, and we always seem to find some type of disagreement there. The most simple way I've put it is the opposite of gullible. I mean, you can.
I'm sorry, I'm having a difficult hearing everyone but Kevin. So let me ask you to rephrase or restate. The opposite of what?
The opposite of gullible is being a skeptic, which I would consider to be intelligent, because you can know and memorize a lot of stuff that you've read, documentaries. You can have a lot of knowledge that you memorized and still be a fucking idiot and still fall for the dumbest shit. There are Mensa members out there who believe in parapsychology and global warming is a hoax, and they believe in astrology. And these are Mensa people with an IQ of 170, while once you find somebody who has an IQ of 170 and subscribes to a whole bunch of stupid shit like that, I think the definition of intelligence kind of goes out the window.
Yeah, that's fair, I guess. That's fair. Seth, you were pretty much the... I like to think of you as, there was the first generation of atheists in modern times, like the Four Horsemen. And when you came along with your show, I like to think that you were pretty much the starting point of the second generation after these guys. Do you feel you started a trend with your show? Because now there's a lot of atheist shows, including this very one.
Oh, I don't know. I can't speak to... I mean, others would have to speak to how much I actually provided any sort of influence. Part of me thinks I just sort of jumped in at the time when radio, internet radio was beginning its surge. So, if there are 100 atheist podcasts out there, I certainly can't take credit for any one other than my own. I think a lot of people were just simply becoming aware of the technology that existed that circumvented these AM/FM radio entities. It used to be radio was locked up if you weren't working for the corporate machine or you were rich enough to buy your own station. You never had a radio show. But of course, the internet has given voice to anybody and everybody. Mm-hmm. And I think I might have just sort of been there at the right place at the right time. And I also showed up at a time when, and it's not as nearly as bad now, but when I first began the show, we were a movement in desperate need of storytellers. We had a lot of data.
Yes.
You could hear Victor Stenger give a talk on these hard scientific issues, and you read about evolutionary biology, and you see lectures on YouTube, and when someone brings a Betacam and sticks it on the back wall as the speaker's way off here talking in clinical terms under fluorescent lighting, and we needed story. People want to be taken on a journey. People want you to paint pictures with words. People want to feel like you're relating to them. And then they will take the journey with you. And one thing I felt like I was able to bring to the table was that I'm a storyteller. I mean, I came from the business of audio and then video storytelling. I was a video producer for 10 years. And to be able to use language in a way that, relates to people. And people admire Dawkins, and they admired Dennett, and they admired Victor Stenger and all that. But they relate to me. Yeah. I'm just some guy who says, I don't know all the answers. I'm just struggling to keep up. I just want to find out whatever's true. When I bring a guest on, there's a good chance I may know the answer to the question before I ask it, and there's just as good a chance I don't have the first clue what the answer is. That's why I'm asking, right? And people then feel like we're shoulder to shoulder taking the journey together, and that has seemed to resonate with people, Mm-hmm. And, have there been people who've been influenced by the work? I hope it's made a positive impact in their lives. I hope that it's making a difference. Otherwise, it's just useless. It's just white noise. Mm-hmm. I wanted to encourage people. I want people to be emboldened that their life is theirs to live. I want people to feel like it's okay to live their own lives, and it's okay to ask questions. And maybe they've taken some cues from some of the formatics. I don't know. But I certainly hope it's made some waves out there.
I got 2 questions from people that I kind of polled from my groups, and one was, is he a skeptic in other regards, not just God, and where does he stand?
You mean for Seth?
Yeah. And where does he stand politically, kind of left, right, central?
Okay, the question is twofold, Seth. The first question is, are you a skeptic as to other parts of your life, not just in regards to God? And question 2 is, where do you stand politically?
Well, I hope I am. We're all probably victims of bias. I'm doing a show in March with Dr. Elizabeth Loftus that talks about human memory and bias in the brain, and I'm just kind of hot off that. I realize we're all biased, impressionable creatures.
You can't handle the truth!
I did find once I emerged from the fog of superstition that I had to reevaluate a bunch of other stuff at the same time. All of a sudden I thought, well, wait a minute. Now, if I was wrong or I assumed about this, maybe I should reevaluate that. And so I started going point by point through the different sort of convictions I had in my life, and I found myself taking a new position. I used to be pro-death penalty.
Yeah, me too.
And now I'm very much against it. I used to be a political conservative, and now, while I'm conservative on a few issues, largely I identify as a Democrat. I'm a Democrat and a liberal, and I used to be and against abortion in pretty much every case, and now I'm totally pro-choice. I used to be anti-gay marriage, and now I'm totally pro-LGBT. You know, it's interesting when you are no longer chained to dogma. You know, you're no longer sort of shackled with the indoctrination that was given to you at youth and carried with you through life. When you're no longer absolutely sure because God wants it that way, you start to look at things again, and you make a change. And I think that's healthy. It was healthy for me to start to look at the world differently. And what's funny now is that I look around, I see people who talk in my circles exactly the way I did, but they're reinforced all the time. They go to Sunday church and they get reinforced. They watch Fox News and listen to Michael Savage and Rush Limbaugh, and they get reinforced. And they have really little idea about the other perspectives that are out there. They're in a kind of a feedback loop of this righteous indignation about the state of the world, and they're often very judgmental people. I used to be that way. So I used to be a Glenn Beck listening to, Fox News watching Republican, and now I'm kind of a heathen liberal progressive.
But are you
and the better for it?
Okay, well, there seem to be some common conspiracy theories amongst the left versus right. I don't have any strange scientific unmainstream super beliefs, but I'm just wondering about you, like regarding like the common ones, like GMOs and vaccines specifically, because those tend to be the left-wing ones.
I didn't have much of a perspective on vaccines. I certainly was. I didn't know much about them, and I was more trepidatious about them. GMOs was one I had to come back and apologize for. I was like, I used to be anti-GMO because, it can't be good. And of course, I hadn't read a lick of science about it.
The naturalistic fallacy.
Yeah, totally.
Bill Nye changed his mind like a year or two ago. Did you guys see that? He came out and just straight up said, I was wrong about GMOs.
Yes, we did see that from Bill.
Yeah. And I say the same thing to you, Francis, because you're just worried about corruption.
Seth, with now you're President Trump, what do you think the impact of his presidency are going to be on atheism in the future?
I struggle a little bit with it because every political sort of a cycle, we hear people speaking in hyperbole, about the best and the worst, and things are going to hell in a handbasket, and I'm terrified of the future, and blah, blah, blah. And so, it's hard for me to say the words without them just splashing up against people who've heard it about every candidate, But in my own life, I've never been as frightened for the United States as I am at this moment, and I don't think it's hyperbole to fear kind of this weird nationalist, authoritarian, Orwellian kind of thing. I mean, we're already seeing the executive orders. We're seeing the playing to our most shallow fears, a celebrity culture, an entertainment culture that knows very little about the world it lives in, but it's afraid and it just wants someone to handle it. I'm preparing a broadcast for the date of the State of the Union address, where I'm going to give a secular State of the Union. We're going to talk about the administration and, sort of the anti-science culture that's being populated, with Betsy DeVos, and you got Carson, who's a pediatric neurosurgeon being appointed to housing, the guy who once thought that the pyramids were built for the biblical
Brains.
Joseph to store grain. I mean, it's just terrifying to see the popularization of the celebration of anti-science culture. To see, the closing of channels, the gagging of the EPA, the hamstringing of NASA climate science. Yeah, I'm scared. I'm genuinely scared. I don't know that we can last 4 years of this. Something's going to have to come to critical mass.
Seth, do you want to hear my little Dunning-Kruger?
Go ahead.
I have the solution here. So one of the things that I've been trying to promote since I've noticed that the conspiracy theories, the belief in God, the belief in all these weird pseudo-scientific things, if you really trace the source, it comes down to logical fallacies. So we found this book. It's called the Illustrated Book of Bad Arguments. It goes through probably about 28, I think, of the most common logical fallacies. It's kind of geared towards kids a little bit, probably a little older, kind of like Magic of Reality 10 or 12, that kind of thing. I think that's kind of the solution to preventing these people from ending up believing this stuff, is starting it in high schools before these people become fucking voters, because that's how they fell for fake news. Just all we need to do is include identifying reliable and unreliable sources, like citing a paper for university with fake news and logical fallacies. I am yet to hear an argument for God, anti-vaccine, anti-GMO, Holocaust denial that is not based on a logical fallacy. So we need to cure that.
If you are cultivating young people with the tools for how to think instead of what to think, and you realize religion having it in its own interest to propagate, and how do you do that? Well, you make sure that you provide a reinforcement culture where the kid is always seeing and speaking and hearing and doing a specific thing that lines up with your worldview. So, I love the idea of providing sort of an expose of the logical fallacies, but I think it's also important that we be fostering a culture where they're taught how to think, critical thinking skills, and the courage to ask questions in the face of authority.
Yeah, you'll be happy to hear, actually, that up here in Canada, especially here in the province of BC, it is now part of the curriculum that kids will start being taught critical thinking skills.
Yeah, and you know what? They're going to suck at it. And we're going to have to get on their ass.
It's a start, dude. Come on.
They are going to suck at it. I looked at the plans, and their plan literally was teach the kids more critical thinking. There was no actual curriculum.
The comments of Tyler are not necessarily those of left valley subsidiaries.
I've heard Christians, they're like, well, I've taught my child, it's usually a defensive parent, I've taught my child to critically think, and we went through a critical analysis of the scripture in our homeschool, and my child now knows even more that Jesus is. Oh yeah, I stop and shake my head, because I think this is the ever-moving goalpost, right? Without specifics to the program, exactly how is it managed? If you can't measure it, how do you manage it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Seth, there's one thing I gotta confess one thing to you, Seth. This has been eating at me for a long time now, ever since I first met you at Imaginal Religion 4. Seth, I'm a francophone, which means sometimes I trip onto my words. And you were so kind to grant us an interview a couple of years ago, and we played the interview on our show. And I said to everybody that Seth is a big fan of coffee. Every time I see Seth, actually, I make a point of actually stopping and bringing coffee. But the thing is, in French, in my mind, right, my brain kind of twisted halfway, the word fan translates to amateur. See where I'm going with this? So I call Seth an amateur of coffee. And it's been eating at me for years, Seth. So I'm so sorry. I apologize. I hope you can forgive me.
No, hey, I went over my head, I must have gotten what you were trying to communicate,
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much for your time, Seth. I appreciate your time you've given us to us, but the mic is all yours, my friend. Be shameless, go ahead and plug yourself.
Well, if, I don't, it's hard. I've put a lot into the radio show, and I've tried, I really treat every week almost like it's an audiobook. I mean, I try not to just open the mic and, well, let's just kind of see what comes up. We literally, I put a theme on the show. We try to tackle something different, a themed or topic-driven show every week. And so, we talk about everything from major religions like Catholicism, and we get into the Book of Mormon, and we've talked about Scientology, and we talked about cults and people who've escaped cults. We talk about psychology and belief in the brain. We've done pro-science shows with, hard data, an actual evolutionary biologist that teaches science and teaches evolution to people, to sort of combats the bad ideas about evolution. We've done lifestyle stuff about people escaping religious families and the price they pay. We've gotten into the historicity of Jesus and the problems with the Bible and other holy books, and ex-Muslims and ex-Islamists and people oppressed by Islam. And we just do something different. Sometimes we just do something just for fun. I did a show a few weeks ago called My Date with Google. We just did general knowledge stuff. Why does my dog smell when I give him a bath? Hey, should I actually put premium unleaded in my car instead of unleaded? Because I sure would like to save the money, and just those kind of things, right? We're about knowledge. And so I'm really proud of the variety that the show's provided. I want to make it about real life and stuff that's fun to listen to whenever possible. And we've got some cool stuff on the horizon. Again, Bart Campolo is going to join me. We're going to do that show on how to trick our memory with Dr. Elizabeth Loftus. That's coming up. I'm doing a secular State of the Union mid-February on the very date that Donald Trump's going to do his own State of the Union. We're going to do a secular version for the radio listeners, kind of a manifesto for a secular nation, you know. It was just a lot of good stuff, and the website's got other materials. You can just go to thethinkingatheist.com, and it's all right there. And I just appreciate the opportunity to be able to hang out with you guys and to spend a few minutes with people who don't think I'm going through midlife or in league with Lucifer. So it's been a real joy and a pleasure. Thank you,
Seth. One more thing before I let you go. Can I get you to say, "Hi, I'm Seth Andrews of the Thinking Atheist, and I took a left at the Valley."
Hi, I'm Seth Andrews. I'm host of thethinkingatheist.com, and I took a left at the Valley.
And that was Seth Andrews, the one, the only Seth Andrews. Thank you so much, Seth, for joining us on the show. Thank you to all of us for joining us on the show today. We hope we were good and entertaining for all of you. You can, if you like what we're doing, you can give us a 5-star review on iTunes. That would certainly help us a lot. If you're not going to do that, well, don't bother then. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on iTunes, on Blog Talk Radio, on Spreaker, on SoundCloud, or you can follow us at leftatthevalley.com. Coming up, we will be talking to Michael Smith of the Poorly Summarized podcast. That should be interesting. And the February or March, we'll also be talking to Mr. Didi, Brian Keith Dalton. That should be fun. And we also have Cara Santamaria of the Skeptic's Guide fame, and she's a science communicator, so that should be a lot of fun. Thank you so much, guys, for being with us today. Until next time.
Perfectly intelligent people can reach the conclusion that all non-believers are evil. What a fucked up statement. Do you realize what you're saying? But according to your book, this is how your God made me. Skeptical of anything that contradicts history, denies evolution, hates science, promotes mystery. I'd rather see the truth than to bask in my own ignorance. Rather be alone than surrounded by damn idiots. As long as there's a breath in my body, you can bet your last dollar I'll be working hard fighting this problem. Religion is a disease, it comes from culture, only true on a regional scale. Science is universal. Who are you to say that Horus isn't real, but Jesus is? Or Zeus, Thor, Mithra, Vishnu, you don't believe in them? I think the reason is apparent. You do what you're told and believe in the God assigned by your parents. I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith and unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. Now let me take a sec, don't mean to sound so hateful, but I swear to God, pun intended, I find it disgraceful that thousands of children are raped by priests, and since they're holy men of God, they get away scot-free. And the Pope does his very best to keep it on the hush. Don't wanna affect business, he loves money too much. We know that they love the kids, but how the fuck can we protect them while they planning to molest them? We teaching them to respect them.
Fuck that.
The system is broke down, working backwards, and the only action or tactic I plan to practice now is to attack them. The parties of God's hands are bloodstained, millions of murders by believers, and they're all in God's name. And let me take a sec, don't mean to sound so hateful, but I swear to God, pun intended, I find it disgraceful that many atheists are told to be quiet. You're not alone, speak your mind, time to let it be known. I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith and unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist.